Hi everyone, welcome. I'm just trying to get my control of the thing so I can bring up my presentation. Kelvin, you could allow me to share the screen. That would be really good. So just a bit of background on myself. I am basically started up a thing called Deloitte Digital, which is one of the world's largest web mobile design firms in the world. And we employ 15,000 people in about 35 countries. And it all started in Melbourne out of a consulting firm called Deloitte. And so I started working with internet technologies back in around 1993 when the first web browser came out. And hang on, Calvin's just told me I should be able to share my screen, but it won't let me. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so I started working on those technologies many years ago. And interestingly enough, I didn't have a background in technology. So that made it quite interesting, changed things around quite a bit. Hang on, I've shared the wrong bit of the screen here. Sorry, Calvin, I know we practiced this, but it doesn't seem to be quite working the way I want. Right, share content. Right, here we go. Yeah, so I didn't have a background in technology, and I think one of the key things that I want to get across to everybody is that the sort of decisions that you make at this point in time in your life aren't decisions for life. So if you look at my sort of career, it sort of resembles a bit of a squiggly line. I grew up in Flemington, and I used to work at stables and wanted to be a jockey, but unfortunately I grew to be about 180 centimetres tall and weigh about 80 kilos. So most jockeys tend to be about 150 centimetres tall and weigh about 50 kilos. So that sort of put paid to that aspiration. And then I started working at the racetrack with a bookie, sort of doing all the maths around the betting stuff, which sort of I wouldn't encourage you to do these days. But then I became an accountant, and I studied accounting. I moved to the UK, and whilst I was in the UK, I was asked to run a few technology projects. I just sort of seemed to have a bit of a natural capacity, I think, to design good technology or design good experiences, interfaces, and understand the technology at the back. I became a business consultant where when I started working with the web, I taught myself to code, fairly simply, basic HTML. But what I sort of found with that was that whilst I could do it, I didn't think that I'd ever be really great at it. And I thought that there were people out there who would probably be much better than me at that. But what I was good at was coming up with ideas, and maybe Tim's point, I was good at creativity, seeing opportunities, helping get people on board about, hey, why don't we try this? Why don't we do that? Or if you're trying to achieve this, this is how technology can help you. That e-business consultant role led to me actually, or as with Deloitte, we bought a web development company back in 2000. So initially I was doing mainly consulting and advising, but I really wanted to get a capacity to build stuff. So we bought a web development company, and that sort of went from, over the last 20 years to 15,000 people, which was a good call. And these days I'm a semi-retired futurist. I sort of look at futures, but I'm also a startup founder. I've got a startup called Packform. So I think the key message about this squiggly line thing is that if you look at my background, it's sort of, whatever decision you make today, I would suggest that you're thinking about, well, what am I passionate about? What I'm really interested in? Because you're going to learn more if you're working on stuff that you're really interested in, rather than sort of, oh, I have to do this because, I've got pressure from parents or everybody else is doing that. It's really about finding yourself, and also keeping your eyes open to opportunities and things that arise in the future. And the other thing, of course, is that the world is changing and will continue to change. And what we've seen, I think, during the pandemic is that digital was something that organisations and society had sort of adopted, but with the pandemic, suddenly the world sort of moved to fully digital, and that's changed things a lot. And the pandemic's also meant that we've seen a huge rise in the number of technology jobs. I think the number's about 65,000 new jobs in technology in Australia over the last 12 months. And I think that that will continue. And the other thing is that almost every organisation you're going to work with is increasingly using technology and digital to deliver what they do, to coordinate, to work with their employees, etc. So let's get into some of the stuff that we've been working on recently. So a lot of the work that we're starting to see now is this sort of combination of data, AI, machine learning, and creating simulated scenarios. And one of the ones that I find really interesting is a partnership that Deloitte have entered into with McLaren Applied Technologies. And the interesting part about that is that basically we looked at what we do, or what people do in Formula One. And you can imagine that a Formula One car has got enormous a number of sort of, let's call them Internet of Things, or they're connected to, everything's connected to everything. So we know the tyre pressure, the heat, the speed, every little bit is pumping in data. And they use that data to then optimize, well, hey, we better change this wing or move this or increase that to be able to get the optimum performance for a car. So we went into a partnership with McLaren, and we started to think about, well, where else can we apply that sort of technology? And I'll just give you a bit of a look now. Hopefully the sound will come through. Oh.
It doesn't seem like the audio is working at the moment.
By skilled workers. And we are always looking for ways to make air travel more efficient and more sustainable. And now things are getting even more complex. So say hello to Optimal Reality. Optimal Reality is Deloitte's digital twin capability, based on simulation techniques pioneered in Formula One racing. Optimal Reality helps organizations run millions of permutations on a digital replica of their network to drive optimal decision-making within seconds.
We estimate that at least 30% of air traffic delays can actually be reduced if we can plan for unforeseen events, and that's exactly what Optimal Reality is about.
What we're able to do is bring together all of the information from all of the aircraft and run what-if scenarios to present the optimal solution to our air traffic controllers.
The partnership's really been about innovation and creating joint success. From an innovation perspective, we've been solving problems that really haven't been solved previously in air traffic control, and we were looking at this in a new way.
And what's more, the sky isn't the limit.
Imagine a world where getting from A to B was more sustainable, more reliable, we had better information, it wasn't as congested. Well, Optimal Reality creates opportunities for us to have this experience in our cities, not only today, but into the future.
We can create an integrated view across more than just the transport sector. We're able to create optimal realities to make our lives smarter, safer and healthier, keeping the heart of our cities beating 24/7. And in our post-COVID world, we will be able to find new game-changing solutions for e-commerce, energy transmission, climate change and complex logistics challenges, helping to move the world toward its optimal reality.
All right, I hope that all worked. Just 1 second. To tab across, Alt tab. So, yeah, and if you look at the sort of stuff that we're doing there, so we started with air traffic, but if you imagine that we know that there's a weather event going to hit Sydney, and we say, okay, well, we know planes are coming in. Actually, why don't we keep them on the ground? Because by the time they get here, there's going to be a big storm. They can't land, and we're going to have planes running around in the air and all those sort of things. So being able to sort of predict what will happen and adjust what you do. We're also using this sort of technology around traffic congestion, and also things like as the electricity grid is changing dramatically. We used to have sort of centralized power generation and distributed mainly through coal-fired power stations. Now we're seeing renewable energy farms as well as rooftop solar, etc., all over the place. How do we optimize the stability of the grid? How do we optimize making sure that we have adequate power and understanding what power is out there? Because again, there are millions of panels, millions of batteries, plants, etc. So again, started to say, how do we sort of take some of this capacity with technology to make our lives better? Another one that we've been working on, let me just see. So everything going all right there, Calvin? Yeah, good. So another one that we worked on more recently was one called Deloitte Assist, and this was an interesting one where a problem was identified by one of our people at Deloitte. His father was in hospital with an illness and was having real problems sort of getting nurses to come and help. So here's one that another one we developed.
Voice-activated virtual assistants, turning your home hands-free. Now, in a world first, that same high-tech help is being harnessed at the Prince of Wales Hospital, giving bed-ridden patients a direct line to staff.
This is the conventional way hospital patients call for help. A bell and lights guide nurses to the room, but on a spinal ward, that system isn't ideal.
I'm an incomplete quad, which means I don't have hand function very well, so I can't use any of the buttons and I can't hold a lot of the control systems.
This smart speaker is making the process easier for spinal patients at Prince of Wales Hospital.
Tell the nurse I'm unwell.
Okay, I've sent a request to the nurse and someone will be with you as soon as possible.
All voice-activated alerts are triaged and colour-coded, so urgent matters such as falls and pain can take priority.
We had an early incident where a patient was in the bathroom, couldn't reach the call bell but needed assistance and was able to ask Alexa for that help.
This is a game changer for us.
Engineer Robert Spittle from advisory firm Deloitte devised the product.
The idea came from personal experience. When my father was in hospital, we saw how the traditional systems didn't work.
That redesign also enables nurses to check and manage patient alerts from their mobile devices. This system has only been trialled for a month, but the feedback from both patients and nurses here has been extremely positive.
It makes everyone's life easier.
I think that artificial intelligence is second to none.
The technology could one day expand into aged care and hospitality, but for now...
We're also in the process of designing a new hospital that we'll move into in 2022. So we want to test new technology to make sure that we're building the right hospital for the future.
Gabriella Rogers, 9 News.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. So I think we'll skip over that. And as we start to look forward and start to think about, well, where's the world moving with technology? And we know it's continuing to move fast. So there's things like artificial intelligence. Now, a key thing to understand about artificial intelligence, it's not generalized intelligence. It won't be as smart as you probably ever. But we program rules and we use intelligence to sort of say, hey, I can bring together these elements of data and say, hey, we should be doing this. So again, that field's been around for a long time, but we're starting to see it being deployed and used in all sorts of things. So whether that's, Google Maps telling you how to get the quickest way from A to B, whether it's predictive text, there's a whole raft of things happening with artificial intelligence. And again, a lot of that stuff comes back to data, understanding logic, being able to do the sort of analysis to work out how things should work. Smart cities, the air traffic thing's a good example of that. Connected buildings, how do we improve transport systems? How do we improve electricity? How do we reduce our carbon footprint? 3D printing, it's another area that, it's been around for a little while, but starting to see new ways of doing things, new ways of constructing things, new ways of designing things, prototyping, cryptocurrencies. I'm sure you're all hearing about cryptocurrencies here, there, and everywhere. Still very early. There's still a lot of dodgy behaviour out there. I wouldn't sort of be suggesting that you take your life savings and throw it into cryptocurrencies, but just understand that we are seeing an emergent change in the way financial systems work, and it's one to watch. We've talked about VR and augmented reality. Again, even with the augmented reality stuff, I don't think we've really touched the surface there. about being able to sort of bring to life a physical object, or to be able to sort of point at things anywhere we go and sort of find extra information about that. Internet of Things, again, I think most of you probably know what that is, but things like your Alexas, things like your mobile phones, things like connected devices all over the place. So having sensors placed out in all sorts of places allow us to do sort of understand what's going on. So that can be, electricity networks, it can be around emergency management and, fire detection, things like that. Robotics, again, that's an area that I'm seeing a lot more happening in, and and robots take two forms. Some are physical robots, sort of like your C3POs, and others are software robots that sort of take and automate tasks. We're also seeing a sort of complete change, I think, in the move to electric vehicles. And interestingly enough, we're seeing many of the major car manufacturers globally saying we're moving to, we're going to stop making combustion engines which run on petrol, and we're all going to move to electric. And the other thing about those is these cars will also be connected. So again, starting to be able to manage traffic and automate, or maybe get to the driverless cars thing one day. So this sort of things continue to change, and there will be opportunities right now, in the future. And I would sort of advise you, if you're interested in IT, to take an interest in what's emerging, what you're seeing out there, the problems that you look at in the world and think, I'd like to solve these. How could technology help? And I think another thing I thought would be useful for you, particularly if you're starting to think about careers in technology, is just to take you through some of the people that have worked for me over the years, where they are now, what they studied, and just get a sense of how these careers can expand. So I thought, given that we started with the Formula One stuff, Caleb Sarwade, he actually joined Deloitte from McLaren Formula One technology, and he studied electrical and mechatronic engineering at the University of SA. So the mechatronic stuff is very much that robotics type thing. And then he did a PhD over in the UK, and accelerating the rate of learning for elite athletes for the Olympic Games using virtual environments and simulation. So again, taking that sort of ability of data and all the data of the athletes and how they're performing, and identifying how they should train and what they should be doing to succeed. Shanila Ashraf. So Shanila worked at Deloitte Digital for a while. She's a front-end developer, and she calls herself a glue person, which I think really means about how do I pull together all of these software applications and things people are trying to do and create great experiences at the front end. She's now at Latitude Financial Services. You may have seen their ads. Interestingly enough, she did an undergraduate degree in a non-technology related area. She then picked up a Microsoft Certified Technology certificate in graphic design, and then she went and studied software engineering. And Shanila's what we call a diviner. That's somebody who's got both development skills and design skills, and very rare beasts, because we often need the engineers and the design people to be able to understand how do they create a great experience. And Shanila lives in the middle of that, which is why she'd call herself a glue person. Hadi Michel, Hadi, and when you look at what he studied, his initial study was sort of really from 2007, this Bachelor of Engineering, Mechatronics again, but he also then added to that Bachelor of Commerce, looking at econometrics, how do we measure economic outputs and things like that. So Hadi worked for me, brilliant young technologist. He then went and did a Masters of Philosophy in Cambridge because he was really interested in ethics and technology, how it's changing, how it changes society. And he's now a product manager at Facebook in the US. Lauren's she started with Deloitte Digital as a grad. Fantastic designer, really just brilliant at interactive design. And some of her work that I saw in her early days really just made me think, wow, this girl could go anywhere. And in fact, she has. She's a UX lead at Google in New York, where she specializes in design. But just a really brilliant designer. Heiko's an interesting guy. His mother was Chinese, his father was German. He grew up in Germany. but he sort of wanted to I suppose, go back to his Eastern roots and spent some time in China. Then he decided he wanted to become a sort of multimedia designer, and he did a degree in multimedia design, and then, well, actually a certificate. And once he did that, he went into a degree in animation and interactive media and interactive design. Again, Heiko, really just an extraordinarily good person in terms of being able to take a huge amount of information and make it accessible, understandable, and look fantastic. And he's now the UX design manager at Google Geo, which is their whole sort of geolocation area, again, out of New York. Alicia, now this is a very interesting sort of one. Alicia came from the US. She did a Bachelor of Science and sort of looking at a range of things largely business related, but she got really interested in anthropology and ethnography. One of the things that I think people often don't understand with tech, it's not all about the coding. It's not all about the bits and bytes. It's about how do people use this stuff and what's the situation they're in. So Alicia, yeah, she works on lots of Deloitte projects where she's out there looking at who was trying to do, what's the situation there. So somebody like Alicia would be looking at that hospital scenario, understanding, well, there's, what is the nature of these patients? What language do they use? What do we have to sort of teach them to make it work? So again, bringing that human side into technology is really important. Brad Clayton. Brad, he did a master's in computer science. He's a brilliant software developer. He specializes in mobile stuff and Internet of Things. And again, he came out of South Africa. I actually put out a tweet looking for, back in the day, you can tell how old this is, that a BlackBerry developer, and somebody tweeted back to me and said, oh, there's a guy who used to work at Deloitte South Africa who landed in Sydney, Australia 2 days ago, and he's looking for a job and he's got BlackBerry experience. So I hired him 2 days later. But again, he much more that computer science, and he loves tinkering about sort of creating the connected home and trying things out. Julie Bray, her background is that sort of information systems type of person. So she did computer science, accounting, and information systems. This is the sort of person who goes in and looks at, what do we need to do? How do we structure it? Do the business analysis piece. She now runs her own startup called Connective, which is about connecting schools, parents, and students, and is doing quite well. Cam Adams, another one. He studied computer science and law. Again, interesting mix. But he worked for Eclipse, the web dev company we bought for, then went to Google, and is one of the co-founders of Canva. So Canva, as many of you may know, is that sort of design hub, which is one of Australia's most successful startups. Feng, she's actually an illustrator, and she worked for us for a while, and then has gone out to work for Line in Thailand, who make those little stickers and emojis and all that stuff. And she did a Bachelor of Communication Design at RMIT. So actually, I might leave it there. Have we got any questions about these things? I can't hear you. I can't hear you, Geraldine.
Yeah. So we have a few questions here for you. What's the coolest software project you've worked on?
The coolest one. We did the, I mean, maybe you guys might like, I thought it was pretty cool, the ANZ Little Shop augmented reality dancing game. That was really good. This one might not sound cool, but it was difficult, was where we put RFID tags on every cow in Australia, so we could make sure we could track the movements of every cow and make sure that if there was a disease outbreak, we could stop them. Yeah, so it's sort of funny. Some of them are like, yeah, they're cool, they're fun. Oh, we did some really good stuff with the AFL around their video and how to sort of break their video up in the early days where they started doing online video and being able to sort of, it's sort of, everybody can do it now where you just jump on and click the goals. But back in the day, when we started doing it, that was a fairly much a world first. The system that runs on all the ambulances, so we could actually capture patient details and automatically give them to hospitals as patient came in. They used to use paper. So yeah, sort of some of them I find the interesting ones or the cool ones are where we're making a fundamental change, and not necessarily the most sort of flashy or exciting ones. But yeah, for me, the ones are those ones which really fundamentally change things. And I really love this optimal reality stuff. I just find that a lot of the ways people are making decisions these days aren't based on sort of really good use of data. And I'm particularly interested in about how we can improve the overall electricity grid and migrate off fossil fuels into renewable energies. But I think it's those sort of, to me, that's where something like an optimal reality solution will be really important. And we're talking to a number of people about doing that.
Yeah. What does Deloitte Centre for the Edge stand for, and who started the company?
Okay, so Deloitte Centre for the Edge is effectively a sort of futures think tank where we look at what we see emerging in technology and what's happening not so much in the mainstream, but what are we seeing happening on the edges, and how are we seeing technology and society sort of come together and drive change. So it was started by two old guys. I'm older than me anyway. So one was John Seely Brown. So for any of you who've ever used a mouse or graphical interfaces like Windows, John Seely Brown and his team invented all that stuff back in the day. So he was at Park Xerox. So he's on the board of Amazon these days. He worked with the CIA on technology stuff there. So a real sort of tech guru. Another guy called John Hagel, who was just a great thinker. But really what we're about is like helping people understand how technology is changing the world, but also what the art of the possible is about using technology, and also understanding that, technology in and of itself is neither good nor bad, and people can use it for good and bad things. So helping people really navigate their way through the future.
Yeah, I think we have just time for one final question. Have you met anyone interesting, and who do you look up to?
Oh, yeah. Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple, the Dalai Lama. Yeah, I've met prime ministers and presidents and all that stuff. I've had a really lucky career where I've been able to sort of, even though I come from the sort of wrong side of the tracks in Flemington, been able to get out there. It's interesting from a tech point of view. I look up to the people like say like Elon Musk. Now, Elon's a bit of a weird guy. But what I like about Elon is that he looks at things and says, this is dumb. How do I fix it? So if you go back to the early days, he was like, it's really dumb. You can't pay easily on the internet. So he came up with PayPal. It's really dumb that electric cars look like sort of souped up golf buggies. And, he came up with Tesla. It's really dumb that the batteries for renewable energy are really expensive and not easy to use. So he came up with the Tesla Powerwall. But the one I'm really interested in that he's doing now is Starlink. So I do a lot of work in developing countries, Papua New Guinea in particular. And, in a place like that, people just can't get access to the internet. And but with Starlink, suddenly we're going past all the sort of national-based satellite providers and saying, you know what, I can provide satellite to anybody anywhere in the world. And I live in a remote or sort of out in the country in a bushfire area. Again, being able to have connectivity in the midst of disaster. So I don't agree with everything he does or everything he says, but I really admire the way that he sees problems and does something about it.
Yeah. Thank you for your presentation, Pete.
No worries. Thank you. Have a great one. Good luck with what your decisions you make, everyone.